from John, and I will turn it over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Um, this topic of emptiness comes from Stephen Batchelor's book, Buddhism Without Beliefs. It's a very slim volume. I'm just curious, do any of you have a copy of your own? Okay, Janice does. Okay, because at the end we'll talk about something else connected with that. And this is a short chapter, but I've not included everything in that chapter. And depending upon how the time flows towards the end, if there's time, I might try and make a connection with a passage from Dogen. But there are really no commentaries other than our own on the subject today, so we're not relying on too many commentaries except the printed word of Stephen Batchelor on emptiness. In everyday in everyday experience, one thing leads to the next. I become irritated by something S said to me and end up wanting to hit him. I imagine I see a snake in the pottery shed and freeze in terror. Everything that happens emerges out of what preceded it. Everything we do now becomes a condition for what is possible later. We may speak of conditions and consequences as though they were things, but if we look more closely, they turn out to be processes with no independent reality. The harshness of a barbed remark that haunts us for days is no more than a brief instant isolated from a torrent of events. Yet it stands out in the mind's eye as something intrinsically real and apart. This habit of isolating things leads us to inhabit a world in which the gap between them become absolute. The snake in the shed is really there, as sharply differentiated from the frightened person who beholds it, as from the shards of discarded pottery on which it is coiled. Clutching at ourselves and the world in this way is a precondition for anguish. By regarding things as absolutely separate and as desirable or fearful in themselves, we set ourselves the task of possessing something we can never have, or eradicating something that was never there in the first place. Noticing how things emerge from and fade back into an unbroken flow of conditions begins to free us a little. We recognize how things are relatively, not absolutely, desirable or fearful. They interconnect and interact, each contingent on the others. No one of them intrinsically separate from the rest. Whatever emerges in this way is devoid of an intrinsic identity. In other words, things are empty. They are not as opaque and solid as they seem. They are transparent and fluid. They are not as singular and straightforward as they seem. They are complex and ambiguous. They are not only defined by philosophy, science, and religion. They are evoked through the play of illusions, paradoxes, and jokes. They cannot be pinned down with certainty. They trigger perplexity, amazement, and doubt. The same is true for each one of us. Just as a potter forms a pot on the wheel, so I configure my personality from the spinning clay of my existence. The pot does not exist in its own right. It emerges from the interactions of the potter, the wheel, the clay, its shape, its functions, each of which in turn emerges from the interactions of its causes and components ad infinitum. There is no essential pot to which its attributes adhere, just as there is no essential daffodil to which stalk, leaves, petals, and stamen adhere. Pots and daffodils are configurations of causes, conditions, parts, functions, languages, images. They are devoid of an identity stamped, like a serial number, in the core of their being. And so it is with each of us. As a human being, I am more complex than a pot or a daffodil. But I have also emerged from causes and am composed of diverse, changing features and traits. There is no essential me that exists apart from this unique configuration of biological and cultural processes. Even if intellectually I agree with this, intuitively, it may not be how I feel about myself. In any event, Dharma practice is concerned not with proving or disproving theories of self, but with understanding and easing the grip of self-centeredness that constricts body, feelings, and emotions into a tight nugget of anguish. I'll stop there for a moment. There are a couple of other stops before we get to the end to entertain any brief questions that don't take too long or whatever, or comments. If not, we'll proceed. Self-consciousness is at once the most obvious and central fact of my life and the most elusive. If I search for myself in meditation, I find it like trying to catch my own shadow. I reach for it, but there's nothing there. Then it reappears elsewhere. I glimpse it from the corner of my mind's eye, turn to face it, and it's gone. Each time I think I've pinned it down, it turns out to be something else. A bodily sensation, a mood, a perception, an impulse, or simply awareness itself. I cannot find the self by pointing my finger to any physical or mental trait and saying, yes, that's me. For such traits come and go, whereas the sense of I remains constant. But neither can I put my finger on something other than these traits that, however ephemeral and contingent they may be, nonetheless define me. The self may not be something, but neither is it nothing. It is simply ungraspable, unfindable. I am who I am not because of an essential self hidden away in the core of my being, but because of the unprecedented and unrepeatable matrix of conditions that have formed me. The more I delve into this mystery of who I am, or what anything is, the more I just keep going. There is no end to it, only an infinite trajectory that avoids falling into extremes of being and non-being. This trajectory is not only the center, which is free from this duality, but the central path itself. Emptiness, said the Tibetan philosopher Tsongkhapa in 1397, is the track on which the centered person moves. The word he uses for track is shul. This term is defined as an impression, a mark that remains after that which made it has passed by. A footprint, for example. In other contexts, shul is used to describe the scarred hollow in the ground where a house once stood, the channel worn through the rock where a river runs in flood, the indentation in the grass where an animal slept at night. All these are shul, the impression of something that used to be there. A path is a shul because it is an impression in the ground left by the regular tread of feet, which has kept it clear of obstructions and maintained it for the use of others. As a shul, emptiness can be compared to the impression of something that used to be there. In this case, such an impression is formed by the indentations, hollows, marks, and scars left by the turbulence of selfish craving. When the turmoil subsides, we experience tranquility, relief, and freedom. To know emptiness is not just to understand the concept. It is more like the stumbling into a clearing in the forest, where suddenly you can move freely and see clearly. To experience emptiness is to experience the shocking absence of what normally determines the sense of who you are and the kind of reality you inhabit. It may last only a moment before the habits of a lifetime reassert themselves and close in once more. But for that moment, we witness ourselves and the world as open and vulnerable. This calm, free, open, and sensitive space is the very center of Dharma practice. It is immediate, imminent, and dynamic. It is a path, a track. It grants an intimation of the invisible point to which the lines of our lives converge. It allows unobstructed movement, and it assures us that we are not alone. It implies indebtedness to those who have trodden this path before, and responsibility to those who will follow. Another pause. Okay.
Well,
Yes,
that
go ahead.
that very last section that you read, just kind of mark it so that I'd like you to repeat it,
Okay.
because it's a lot to take in. It's about, it was what emptiness, if we experience emptiness, even for just a moment, this is what, kind of happens, or how you get rid of your habitual behavior. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And I hope to be able to send you a PDF of this section, a day or two later.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Okay. Emptiness is a confusing term. Although used as an abstract noun, it does not in any way denote an abstract thing or state. It is not something we realize in a moment of mystical insight that breaks through, to a transcendent reality concealed behind yet mysteriously underpinning the empirical world. Nor do things arise from emptiness and dissolve back into it as though it were some kind of formless cosmic stuff. These are just some of the ways emptiness has been appropriated as a metaphor of metaphysical and religious consolation. Emptiness is a starkly unappetizing term used to undercut yearnings for such consolation. Yet, ironically, it has been called into the service of such longings. Shunyata, emptiness, is rendered into English as, open quote, the void, close quote, by translators who overlook the fact that the term is neither prefixed by a definite article, the, nor exalted into a capital letter, both of which are absent in classical Asian languages. From here, it is only a hop, skip, and a jump to equating emptiness into such metaphysical notions as the absolute, the truth, or even God. The notion of emptiness falls prey to the very habit of mind it was intended to undermine. Emptiness is as devoid of intrinsic being as a pot, a banana, or a daffodil. And if there were no pots, bananas, or daffodils, there would be no emptiness either. Emptiness does not deny that such things exist. It merely describes how they are devoid of an intrinsic, separate being. Emptiness is not apart from the world of everyday experience. It only makes sense in the context of making pots, eating bananas, and growing daffodils. A life centered in awareness of emptiness is simply an appropriate way of being in this changing, shocking, painful, joyous, frustrating, awesome, stubborn, and ambiguous reality. Emptiness is the central path that leads not beyond this reality but right into its heart. It is the track on which the centered person moves. And we too are impressions left by something that used to be here. We have been created, molded, formed by a bewildering matrix of contingencies that have preceded us. From the patterning of the DNA derived from our parents, to the firing of the 100 billion neurons in our brains, to the cultural and historical conditions of the 20th century, to the education and upbringing given us, to all the experiences we have ever had and choices we have ever made, these have conspired to configure the unique trajectory that culminates in this present moment. What is here now is the unrepeatable impression left by all of this, which we call me. Yet so vivid and startling is this image that we confuse what is a mere impression for something that exists independently of what formed it. So what are we but the story we keep repeating, editing, censoring, and embellishing in our heads? The self is not like the hero of a B-movie who remains unaffected by the storms of passion and intrigue that swirl around him from the opening credits to the end. The self is more akin to the complex and ambiguous characters who emerge, develop, and suffer across the pages of a novel. There is nothing thing-like about me at all. I am more like an unfolding narrative. As we become aware of all this, we can begin to assume greater responsibility for the course of our lives. Instead of clinging to habitual behavior and routines as a means to secure this sense of self, we realize the freedom to create who we are. Instead of being bewitched by impressions, we start to create them. Instead of taking ourselves so seriously, we discover the playful irony of a story that has never been told in quite this way before.
Thank you, John, for that. That was very interesting. Emptiness is such a it's a complex, I think, concept, and one that I mean, I know I still struggle with it. It's it encompasses so much. It's hard, and really that's why it's so central to our teaching, I think, because it is not something that really can be defined, but we strive to define it. And so when we say form is emptiness, emptiness is form in the Heart Sutra, we're in some way we're trying to define something that encompasses everything, but also is without intrinsic value. So I liked his description of the footprint in the grass, and that really kind of described it for me. I thought of traces. There's always traces of things left over. There's clues, like something. I'm looking at the mat in front of me, and there's little indentations, and that spoke of a chair that used to be there. And so there's these traces, and we construct that in our mind, and we kind of picture it. I was talking with my wife yesterday about a book I'm reading, and that had been made into a movie, and we talked about, well, which is better? Do you watch the movie first and then you read the book, or did you read the book and watch the movie? Because one can be better than the other, or one can really be a letdown. Or one, if you watch the movie, then you have this idea of the characters, and when you read the book, you're picturing the characters from the movie, not from the book. So it's really what our mind constructs within the emptiness. Go ahead.
Read the book, don't watch the movie.
I've done that plenty of times, but there are exceptions.
Yeah.
But thank you.
For me, this is one of the best, explanations or, thoughts about emptiness. I've always kind of hated thinking about emptiness because I haven't ever really understood it, but to me, this is almost a more practical way. I'm anxious to read that again, hopefully from your PDF file, and try to think of it literally in my life, and especially right now with decisions I'm trying to make and how I kind of trap myself maybe in, with past experience in trying to figure out how to make the, a decision for now. So anyway, thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Now, keep in mind that we have some time, and depending on what questions there are, there's a section of Dogen that doesn't take about 3 minutes to read.
Mm-hmm.
And even though Dogen is supposedly very dense, there are some clues that I think connect to this. But I'll wait until we have some more questions or comments.
John, thank you for the reading. I really enjoyed the reading, and I think I'm definitely going to go and buy the book. So, what got me was I did this training for work the other day, and they were talking about, act authentically, because people can spot when you're acting inauthentically from a mile off. And so it just kind of brought into that question, so what is the authentic self? But, according, to what we've been, learning through your reading and Bruce's teachings in general, our self is more of a process, I think, than anything. So that's the way I would say thank you.
I'll tell you what then, we have some time. I'm going to read a section, about 3 paragraphs from Dogen. And it comes with a little bit of side commentary to understand a couple of words. It's from a section called Only Buddha and Buddha, Yubutsu, Yubutsu, Yubutsu. And before I start the section here, word birds and fish come in here, and they are supposed to represent those who practice. And water and sky and air refer to the realms of practice. Okay? And there's a place here referred to the Dragon Gate. And the Dragon Gate is wrapped midway up the Huang River, where fish who pass are said to turn into dragons. And then there's this mention of the 9 great bends. And the 9 great bends and the Huang River in its entirety is said to have 9 great bends. There has been a saying since olden times, no one except a fish knows a fish's heart. No one except a bird follows a bird's trace. Yet those who really understand this principle are rare. To think that no one knows a fish's heart or a bird's trace is mistaken. You should know that fish always know one another's heart, unlike people who do not know one another's heart. But when the fish tries to go up through the Dragon Gate, they know one another's intention and have the same heart. Or they share the heart of breaking through the 9 great bends. Those who are fish hardly know this. Again, when a bird flies in the sky, beasts do not even dream of finding or following its trace. As they do not know that there is such a thing, they cannot even imagine this. However, a bird can see traces of hundreds of thousands of small birds having passed in flocks, or traces of so many lines of large birds having flown south to north. Those traces may be even more evident than the carriage tracks left on a road or the hoof prints of a horse seen in the grass. In this way, a bird sees birds' traces. Buddhas are like this. You may wonder how many lifetimes Buddhas have been practicing. Buddhas, large or small, although they are countless, all know their own traces. You never know a Buddha's trace when you are not a Buddha. You may wonder, why do you not know? The reason is that while Buddhas see these traces with a Buddha's eye, those who are not Buddhas do not have a Buddha's eye and just notice the Buddha's attributes. The reason well, maybe it's self-evident, even though in Bachelor's chapter he doesn't use the word trace, it's all over the place. I mean, and of course, Dogen wrote his piece, 700 years earlier, so, yeah.
Yeah, it made me think about last week, and we talked about the ox herder, and that after he comes back into the village, and it says he's with the wine drinkers and the butchers, and that they are all Buddhas. And that he could see he sees the Buddha nature in everyone as a sage. Perhaps the wine drinkers and the butchers don't see the Buddha nature, but he sees it as a Buddha. He sees everyone else in their own, and that's really what, in some ways, Zen is saying, is that what emptiness is our Buddha nature. And it's just realizing that. And that in what Batchelor talked about towards the beginning is that, there's a reason why we suffer. And because of all these things, the life going around, and we're concentrating on this bit or that bit. And whereas if we open ourselves up to the concept of emptiness and seeing, as Bruce kind of drives home with seeing things as they are, is that the relieving of suffering, maybe not everything. I check in, I've been watching on YouTube, there is a cam on an eagle's nest in Big Bear. And they have 2 eggs, and it's Jackie and Shadow are the parents. And so I've been watching them, and this storm was coming in, because I've seen some snow on it, and they're up about 140 something feet in this tree. But and you can see sometimes the wind and everything. And if I'm just worrying about the eggs and the birds, then yes, there is a suffering. But when I looked, I think late yesterday, and it was just covered with snow. There, you could see one of the birds were in the nest, and it was just covered. And you kind of just felt there was an ache in my heart. But realizing that even though that we need the water and we need the snow, there's still consequences to that. And I think that's what emptiness is asking to do, is not just focus on one thing, but actually experience life as it really is, not our concept, and kind of letting go of those concepts and letting go of those, yes, there might be consequences for these birds, and we can grieve that or suffer. I don't think suffering ever goes away, but it manifests in a different way. So I really appreciate, John, you bringing up this subject, because I think emptiness is so important to all our teachings. It's really as I said, it's it's the Buddha nature of everything. Anyway, thank you.
I'd like to add go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I wanted to, something that you said from Stephen Batchelor really hit home for me. And I think I think what you said was emptiness may last only a moment, then habits of a lifetime come crashing down. And what occurred to me is if I was sitting years ago, I wouldn't even have that moment. Now I kind of know what that feels like now. And it's so brief. But it also reminds me of the ox herding, I think maybe the one where he sees the tracks of the ox before he didn't even see the tracks. And then at some point you see the tracks. So, I mean, this is I think, very helpful for me to be aware of this.
I will also be able to attach, as part of the one Bachelor, the PDF section from Dogen that I read. But if I may add something here, it may not be as apparent in the Bachelor passage, but it comes more home to me in the Dogen passage, that these traces, and the reason that that supposedly some birds or fish or some people don't recognize these traces, is what he's talking about is, in my thinking, is that if you're aware there's a path, the fourfold path or whatever, then you seek it. But if you're not aware of it, you have no clue that it's out there. And so this image of birds flying in the air, and I've thought about migrating, 10,000 miles, I can see how somehow or another they pick up the vibes that there have been traces in this air. We just are not aware how they could be aware of these things. But I can, it's just a very evocative image to imagine these traces that we have no concept of. But the minute we have a concept of it, that's the path. That's the shul, the impression, the trace. Okay.
Well, thank you, John.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I don't think we have anything else. We'll be back next week. I don't know if Bruce might be back, but he might not be giving a talk. So I'm prepared to give one more, I believe, before he comes back, or if he comes back. I think he was scheduled to come back Friday. So, but thank you for everyone to being here. And let's do the refuge.
Thank you, Kevin and John, for helping us continue. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We take refuge in Buddha. We take refuge in Dharma. We take refuge in Sangha. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Duriyampe Buddham saranam gacchami. Duriyampe Dhamman saranam gacchami. Duriyampe Sangham saranam gacchami. Adiyampe Buddham saranam gacchami. Adiyampe Dhamman saranam gacchami. Adiyampe Sangham saranam gacchami. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week.
Okay,
Thank you. Thanks.
Right.
Thanks, John. Kevin. everyone?
Right.
Can I talk to you?
Yes.
Sorry. Oh, I was going to ask Kevin if I could ask you, when do you want to put those links up on the website?
I went to talk with Bruce
Okay,
before I do anything.
okay, okay.
It was because we kind of took a poll last week, and everybody was really kind of into it and said that they'd love to have the reference, and that's what was my thought. So maybe if we put up maybe a place where they can go and find these links. Yeah, I'm putting these on the cloud, so they should, they should stay there. So yeah.
Right, right. Okay, because I can easily make another page that
Oh,
we
okay.
can start and I can put like the title of the talk and the date, and then
Uh-huh.
just make that the link so that
Oh,
people,
yeah.
it's easy for people to navigate.
Yeah,
So-
that'd be great. So yeah, I
Okay.
just want to run it past Bruce and make sure
Yeah.
he is okay with it. So, and
That
then we'll go
that
from
it's
there.
kosher, yeah. Is he traveling?
Well, his brother's wife passed away,
Oh, okay.
and I
Yeah.
guess she's been sick for a while, and she passed away. So yeah, he went and to New York and to be with him and help him through that. So,
Yeah.
but he's
Sorry.
supposed to be back. I believe he said he was going to be back either Thursday or Friday this coming week. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
great. Then, yeah, and then we'll go from there. So,
Okay.
all right, then, I will thank you for letting me know. And it's super easy for me to whip up another page and get that so that people can look at previous recordings of things. So
Awesome.
that's a whole other thing that we might think about too, is like a page with like a bibliography, like that link. Then I would also put in a little bit of information that references the books
Oh
that,
yeah.
that are like Buddhism Without Belief, and this is the chapter you look at,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
yeah, there's a bunch of stuff we could do for that too. So
Yeah. I think that would be great. That way people could actually reference, whatever might have, if we're reading out of a book or if we're reading out of a piece of Dharma or whatever it might be, because there's so many.
there's so
references.
much.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I have this ever expanding book collection that I haven't even gotten to yet.
Oh, I know. Yeah. So.
Okay.
yeah,
All
I
right. Well,
appreciate that.
okay. Yeah, you're welcome. So, all right. Well, I will hopefully see you next week.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you
then.
very much. Okay.
All right. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.